Right, we have Jazz, we have
Always good to have some constructive
Rod.
public input.
and Heidi. There's no local board input, so we move on. No extraordinary business, no notice of motion, and we're going to the procurement process update for agricultural services, ecological services, and full facilities maintenance and management services. And I remind councillors, all we're talking about here is the procurement process.
Yep, the process.
As part of this open session. So
Yeah.
It's been moved and seconded, Chair.
I'll wait to the main thing. So Rod or Jazz, I'm not sure who's going to lead
Thank
on.
you, Mr. Chair. I'll pick this one up. So, thank you, councillors. As the Chair...
Should I just say one thing, councillors? We all might be a bit confused between the 17A reviews and Project 17, so it's been, so we're quite clear that Project 17 relates to 2017, and that's why it's called Project 17, so it's not the 17A review. Sorry, Jazz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's actually going to be my point at the beginning.
Took his speech.
So now that the wind is out of my sails, thank you, Mr. Chair. As you said, this process started in March 2016 because we knew our contracts for the provision of services that are covered in the discussion today were coming to an end in 30th of June 2017, hence why it was called Project 17. So the project team was set up in March 2016 and produced a strategy to go out and procure services in a different way in order to deliver what the community wanted. There was a lot of discussion, particularly through local board services, or local board should I say, and through community feedback regarding where our service levels were falling short. And so the team, or predecessor to Rod's team, took that on board and put together a strategy which addressed those issues, in particular looking at those outcomes that the local boards and the community were looking for. One of those issues identified was the duplication across service lines in the region, and what was recommended as part of the strategy was to cluster into local board areas in 5 particular areas across the region, and they've been defined as Tahi, Rua, Toru, Wha and Rima. What the Project 17 did was look at exactly what the outcomes were that were desired, put together a procurement plan which then addressed those outcomes, and we took those to market in August 2016, looking to invite suppliers to provide us with a different way of delivering these services and to provide us with value for money. So that was done by way of a 2-stage procurement process, being an expressions of interest followed by a shortlisting of those participants that expressed interest, who were then invited to participate in a request for proposal, or RFP. And we are now at the end of that process, where in the confidential part of this agenda you'll be receiving the reports which have been through the Strategic Procurement Committee and recommended to this committee for approval. So in terms of discussion around the particulars of the recommendation, I would recommend that be reserved to the confidential part, but happy to answer any questions about the procurement process.
Councillor Walker.
Quite obviously we're going to be discussing this later, but I'm looking at page 10, where under 15 there are a number of issues and challenges listed, and they go to things like uncoordinated approach and lack of good quality asset information and so on. These are historical situations, the current situation. Obviously we're taking this geographical approach. Having said that, the concerns of the community are often very much functional. So we had a speaker earlier, for example, that was very concerned around the use of sprays, around health effects. How are we going to deal with efficiencies around function, particularly as it goes to economies of scale, and all of the things that you're listed here, in a circumstance where you've got head contracts that are geographical, and there may not be a functional relationship across the board, across those contracts. So, to give you an example, let's say we've got some wonderfully efficient, sustainable, chemical-free technology that exists. How can we make sure that that can apply across these existing contracts that are geographical when it's functional?
Through you, Mr. Chair. That's a good question, and we can address it a little bit more through the confidential discussion around the structure of the contracts. But what I can also say is that Rod's team, so the community facilities team, has gone through a restructure to address exactly those functional issues. And so there is not only a contract management team, but also a supplier management team and an audit team. And they would look at those areas of service if it's a functional issue, and they'll look at it in a region-wide sense as well. So if there's an efficiency or an innovation that is presented to any one of those areas or across a range of those clusters, then they would look to leverage that across the region if it makes sense from an efficiency and a financial point of view.
I have a further question, and that goes to an issue that's been raised and obviously something that concerns the community, and that's around transparency, value for money, and goes to the concept that I'm putting around functionality. How is it going to be possible for the community and also council to have oversight around particular costs that are functional costs? For example, it might be around mowing, it could be around spraying, it could be around some issue such as that across the region, when those costs effectively are hidden within these larger contracts. So how can the council and the community have some oversight? And it particularly goes to value for money, innovation and the like. Are we going to make those costs available?
Through you, Mr. Chair. In terms of visibility around performance, etc., if I can address that in two parts. So one is performance. In the contracts themselves, there is a very comprehensive regime around meeting performance indicators, and that will be reported monthly and quarterly. And so the councillors and the community certainly will have visibility around performance of the contractors. In terms of any particular detail that is specific to a contractor and a particular pricing, we will review that in terms of whether that's confidential information or sensitive information. If not, we do publish the spend data, and I acknowledge, Councillor Walker, your observation that we don't generally get too granular around that, but if it is an issue that we can report at a granular level without affecting the confidentiality of a supplier's IP or information, we would look to do that.
And just a question around the contracting process. Does the council receive the information around the breakdown of a contract at large levels? For example, vegetation control, and obviously you've got other aspects of maintenance. There might be a breakdown around the aspects that go to vegetation control around mechanical edging, spraying and the like. Do we have visibility over that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. In terms of providing that confidentially to the councillors, I wouldn't believe that's an issue. In terms of publishing that to the public, that may go to breaching some IP.
Thank you, Jazz.
And
Councillor Sayers?
through you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Walker, that's about 5 questions in a row. I think
What's wrong with
wait for
questions?
confidential, so Councillor Sayers.
Okay. This is the one item we've got on the agenda today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Three questions, all fairly brief. The first one's a very broad question, Jazz, and we can go into more detail and confidential. but it's probably appropriate to ask this question very broadly, a very broad answer, in terms of and it's around the financial envelope. So we had a financial envelope to deliver all the services within. Have we delivered in that financial envelope or not?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I guess without getting into confidential aspects of the detail, there's a broader financial envelope, which is the annual plan process. And if I may defer to Mr. Ramsey, he might be able to talk through that process.
I don't think we need to go any further than that. We actually have a broader envelope, which is the LTP. So any going outside supposed envelope at the moment gets addressed in the long-term plan, Councillor Sayers.
All right, so it sounds like we might have to be doing that I can read into that answer. And these others, just picking up on the point there, Jez, a quick one on the transparency. My understanding is that there was an idea of putting contracts on the web for the public to see and subcontractors up to a certain level within that. Is that still on the agenda?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that will be presented to the Strategic Procurement Committee, a proposal around what additional reporting we do on our website through the May meeting of that committee.
All right, great, fantastic. And last one, Ross, which I've given the heads up through you, and this is just the update from the Local Government Commission around the work that they're doing.
That will be dealt with in confidential as the first part of the...
All right, okay, all right, thank you.
Councillor Hulse.
Thank you. I've just got two clarifications to make. So am I correct in saying, without divulging any of the confidential material that we're going to go into, that the way the new contracts are structured, the key driver is more localised board input? And secondly, on the issue of herbicide reduction, that the new contracts are driven by the herbicide reduction policy and will make it clearer that herbicide is actually being reduced in a local area by area measurable way.
To you, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. And the answer to the first one is yes, and the answer to the second one is yes too. That the local boards will get data on a park-by-park basis of how much chemical has been sprayed in those parks, so they can actually get a benchmark, so they can work with the contractor and set the KPIs internally with the local board on how they reduce the herbicide use if they wish to do that through these contracts. That's the transparency, and the decision making is all back with the local boards and the community to set those targets.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to clarify that, and I will be putting this information clearly together as I have read word for word every email that's been sent to me about glyphosate, every word that's been sent to me about glyphosate, and those emails are filed and the information has been made available to everyone who's written to me, and we will make it even more clearly available to those people yet again post today. Thank
That
you.
was a good follow-up question.
I thought so too.
Councillor Watson.
Thanks. And just following on from your comments there, Rod, in terms of that data to the local boards on a park-by-park basis, I'm just curious to know what that means in practical terms. Is it will it be like a printout of, you know, how much say glyphosate is being spraying, or is it a identification of areas that that still remain sprayed within each individual park? And whatever the answer may be to that first part, does that then give the local board the ability after that to say, well, actually, in terms of an improved service level for us, that doesn't need to be sprayed, we're quite happy with it, it doesn't need to be done. Is that the sort of arrangement that we're thinking of coming out of this?
Most definitely. It's for the local board to actually get the information about a park-by-park basis, what areas are sprayed. If the board decides to reduce their service level and say that they want to turn it into a meadow and the grass grows higher, if that's what their community wants and they needs, that's when it comes back to a local board decision around reducing herbicide use.
Okay, and just in terms of that mechanism with the board, Rod, and that's very encouraging to hear. In terms of communicating that, that will be done to them in term. I mean, I'm thinking of some of the local boards have a lot of parks, you know, playgrounds and parks as you know, combined, it can be quite numerous. What's the actual mechanism for allowing them to take up that very kind offer in terms of identification? Will that be to individual board members, or will it be via some sort of submission process of the board as a whole, covering them all off in their local board area? Is there any particular thoughts on that at the moment?
Yep, so we will have monthly workshops with the local boards where we will report on the KPIs of the contract, where the contract has come to from a high level point of view. On a quarterly basis, we will obviously sit down in a more intense meeting with the local board, and where they'll be able to set these targets and look at what we're doing and look at where if they want to reduce any of the service level or increase it. They will have the option. Our job is to be trying to get as much into these contracts as possible from a local board perspective. We got resolutions from every local board on what was important to them prior to Christmas, and then it was actually put into this process. We've now gone back to local boards and had a resolution from every local board supporting the process that we're taking and the way and that their involvement. So their involvement, and there's a commitment that we will go back to them next month, where I will actually go back and see every local board again and work with them on their smart and social procurements, their environment targets that we want to set, and their asset database. It's the first time they've actually had their asset database. It's the first time they've had input to local service levels, and it's the first time they will set the smart procurement targets for their region and for their region. So the commitment is that we will go back next month and do that and set those targets with them. And then they will be measured on a quarterly on basis. And to answer Councillor Walker's question, we have got an internal audit system that we've got that's been produced, which will be spread across the region. So while these contracts are locally based and cluster area based, we have a team that actually measures performance from a regional perspective. And to come back to efficiencies, there's quarterly workshops with every contractor where we come together on a quarterly basis, where we look at efficiencies, target savings, where we can look at saving targets, new chemicals, new way of reducing herbicide, new efficiencies, what's new to the market, and what's working well in some areas and what's not working. So we're bringing the teams together on a quarterly basis as a regional approach to say, well, if something's working well over here, let's put that across the region. So while it's always been our intent is that these contracts are making our size and scale work, and then we obviously get local input from a smart procurement and a social point of view and an environment point of view.
Just make the comment, Mr. Chair, that certainly on the face of it, the willingness to engage and reflect local needs is something that we hope the other divisions of the council pick up. Thank you.
You're right. Councillor Cooper.
I think my question's been answered, Mr. Chairman, and just around if things aren't working, there is that flexibility. For example, if there's people that saying we want to use thermal treatment of weeds, but then it doesn't kill them, what other methods are there? Because I think there's another side to that as well. So I think it'll each be determined by each local board, I imagine. So thank you.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the contractors that we're working with are all open to doing experiments, all open to looking at how different things work and then measuring those and then reporting those back to a local board basis. So if something doesn't work or it does work, we can then do a cost comparison on those sorts of things. So these contracts are open and flexible enough that any service can come in and out, any CCO can join us or not join us. So there's really size and scale and the flexibility from a local board point of view to work with service levels.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, because it's already been moved and seconded, can I just make a comment?
Yes.
Thank you. I just want to thank the team for doing all this, because over the last 6 years, I think a lot of local boards have felt and councillors have felt pretty powerless in this regard. When people from the community come to us and say, look, why isn't this happening, or really worried about the state of this building or my town centre, or there's weeds in the gutters, in the roads, things aren't cut. Everybody just says, oh, we can't do anything or something, or there's sort of no real direct person. And now with the way this is set up, with team leaders and the local boards have got much more say, I think I think it'll go a lot better. it'll be more value for money, but it'll also be connected to the community, and I think that's what's really important. We're kind of starting, if we can get this through, I think we're starting to come of age as a council for the region, and getting more connected back to our communities, and I think that this is the nuts and bolts of what we do as a council. This is probably some of the most important stuff. It's our, what you call community-facing stuff, and people pay their rates. They want to see their towns and their communities tidy, and I think this is hugely important work, so I want to thank you. It feels like you've done everything you possibly can to get it where it is now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Collins.
Thanks, Chair. One question's been answered on smart procurement, so thank you. I just wanted to ask one question and a quick comment. In the report, it says that local boards are being asked for feedback. Can you guide me on how many have formally resolved as far as this report is concerned?
Through you, Mr Chair, I believe that was circulated to the councillors, but I understand that all 21 local boards have formally resolved, and that feedback should be available to you.
Excellent, thank you. And so just the last comment I wanted to make was with regard to the Māori impact statement, and I'm excited to see point 31 about how the project is going to, asking the suppliers to explicitly identify how, where and when Māori outcomes there'll be delivery as far as those contracts are concerned, which also means I'm resting relatively comfortable with the approach with smart procurement, so thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. Councillor Lee, Mike Lee.
Thank you. I just want to go back to the glyphosate issue, and as I understand it, glyphosate and use of chemicals will be progressively reduced, but there doesn't seem to be any indication or reassurance to the public in the open report about this. Why is this?
Through you, Mr Chair, once these contracts have been approved by this committee today, we will work with the Project 17 team and the local boards around exactly what outcomes will be delivered when, and that will be communicated to the public. I believe a communications plan is being developed, and once confirmed, we will communicate that.
Okay, in some ways, this issue reminds me of the lead in petrol debate, and that is subject to a current news item in regard to long-term effects. But this is more of a technical question. Is management looking in terms of the use of glyphosate? Is management differentiating the use of that particular organophosphate herbicide and others? I hear a lot about spraying, I hear a lot about chemicals, and I hear about glyphosate, and often all of them are all muddled together, but that is not necessarily the way it should be. There may be alternatives which which are not based on this agent and are not subject to the concerns, not just here but all around the world. So are we looking at different alternatives in terms of chemical spraying?
Yes, so while we talk about glyphosate, we're looking at the whole environment and the whole lot of the sprays we use.
I think we need to be careful in the terminology we use. You know, talking about chemicals and spraying and glyphosate and not differentiating what we're actually talking about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Just a quick comment, because I think most of my questions have been answered. You know, I personally believe, as a former local board chair, that this is the biggest step up in local government, in the shared government model that we've done. This truly involves the local boards and what happens in their community. And to sort of answer some of Mr. Bartram's comments, it also gives the local community a real chance to be involved what happens in their local communities. I mean, we're a big region. We have the rural sector and the inner urban sector, you know, competing in this space. And I think this absolutely takes that shared governance models and strengthens it. And I think, you know, this will be one of the biggest wins for local boards in how we operate. I really want to congratulate Jazz, you and the team. I think you've really worked to understand the frustrations that for 6 years local boards have had around why can't they get the local park mowed more when they would like it mowed more? Why are their town centres not cleaned to a higher level? Because that's what they want. I think this really responds to that, you know, frequently asked concern that have come from local boards for a very, very long time. We haven't had it right. We have been duplicating. We have had mixed messages across the service deliveries, and this actually clarifies that. So I congratulate you, and I think this is probably one of the biggest wins that we've done to date. Thank you.
Just a question.
And we extend that thanks to Rod and the team as well. It wasn't meant
sorry,
to be just
sorry.
Jazz. So it's Rod
Collective
and the
thanks.
team, Rod and Heidi and the team
Sorry,
as well.
Rod.
So Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Chair, and just want to echo what's been said already around the staff. Can I just confirm that the community facilities maintenance contracts, that they were designed to reflect the objectives of the Auckland Council's weed management policy?
That is correct.
And can I also ask that, or just confirm or not, that some of the headings in regards to the contracts minimise agri-chemical use, integrated weed management, ensure best practices and value for money, empower the community to manage weeds in accordance with the policy?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Walker, a comment.
Not so much a comment, but a very quick question.
I'll allow you a very quick question.
How advanced are we in taking this approach across the AT space, especially as it goes to the berm areas and...
I don't think that's relevant to this, but we'll allow a question. The answer?
Through you, Mr. Chair, is it possible if we can pick that up through the confidential aspect of the report, because some AT issues are addressed there?
Thank you, Jazz. Are there any more questions or comments?
Just a comment,
Yes,
Chair.
comment, yep.
And my only comment to this particular agenda item is the fact that there's also some statutory sort of obligations as well that we need to adhere to, and I mean, I'm sort of reflecting the comments made earlier. But there are some, and some of the practices that we are currently doing, in the last few years, they're accordance to the template and some of the rules from central government. And that's really my comment, is to say that, is that, you know, there are some boundaries and there are some evidence from a central government perspective that we had to adhere to. So I'm glad we are, and I look forward to obviously discussing this particular issue in the agenda. C1.
Right, well, thank you, councillors, and it's good to see we have focused on a very important part of it, which is obviously spraying and ecological aspects, but the biggest chunk of it is actually facilities maintenance and management, which there hasn't been many questions, so obviously everyone's pretty happy about the overall trend of things. So Councillor Sayers, last question, comment?
A comment through you,
Yep.
Mr. Chair. And the comment is I really would like to endorse and reinforce the comments made by my colleague Desley here, Councillor Simpson, in terms of the potential engagement for communities in the processing, and the setting of service levels. But my main comment, Mr. Chair, was, and we may be coming back to that in confidentiality, just listening to Jazz's last couple of answers there, but a real call for the Mayor to consider in the statement of intents that we're drafting up at the moment, perhaps the inclusion of this type of model, particularly Auckland Transport and maybe other appropriate CCOs, Mr. Chair. So that's my comment.
Right, well, thank you. We've moved by councillor Filipano and seconded by councillor Collins. The following resolutions: receive the update and to note the supplier recommendations. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And please stay there, and then we'll move into confidential. So I am going to move the requisite resolution, seconded by councillor Simpson. All those in favour?
Aye.
Right, so we'll just take a couple of minute break while we
This is the best thing.
move